walk the ash. We breathe the fire. Nocturne shapes the iron, Vulkan shapes the soul. The void is cold, but the forge remains eternal. Into the dark, we carry the flame. Carry the flame. We strike the anvil in the Father's name. Father's name. The Drukhari shadow brings the endless night. We are the shield, we bring the blinding light. Lift the hammer, drop the weight. We guard the fragile, we seal the gate. Strike the iron, watch it glow. His stand seeks the nine, the relics lost in the astral sea. We do not mourn the burned, we honor the ash left behind. Every mortal life protected is a spark against the dark. We bear the weight, so they do not have to. Stand the line, hold the heat, never surrender. Never retreat, never retreat. Promethean oath bound in unbroken steel. Make the alien shadow kneel. Purge the rot, cleanse the spire. Feed the sinews to the cleansing fire. Salamanders whole, salamanders burn. For every single lesson that the Father let us learn. Through the empty void, leaving the enemy bastions utterly destroyed. But we hold the line for the mortal soul. The Emperor's children make the Legion whole. Strike the iron, keep the oath, protect the weak. We swore to both. The fire consumes. The melter leaves only slag, but the candle remains. The shield holds. We are the XVIII. We are the flame. Imperator, Gloria.
Hear me, acolytes of the hidden truth. Fire is the ultimate arbiter of the cosmos. It possesses no conscience, no malice, and no mercy. It simply consumes. It reduces empires to ash and purges corruption from the void. Yet, within the roaring heart of the inferno, a profound paradox exists. Fire does not merely destroy. It tempers. It illuminates. It forges the impenetrable iron of survival. I am your humble servant, the archivist, bound to the silent shadows of this subterranean vault. I speak to you through the suffocating gloom of the Sanctum of Oaths. Above my head, the colossal vaulted ceilings disappear into absolute darkness, supported by pillars of heavily oxidized brass. The air here hangs heavy, choked with the acrid stench of burning sacred incense and the lingering dust of decaying parchment. I trace my trembling fingers across the metallic edges of a forbidden vellum scroll. The rusted servo skulls hover in the periphery, casting a sickly, flickering yellow light across the ancient runes. Listen closely to the grinding gears of history, for tonight we pry open a record that defies the cruel logic of our grim millennium. We speak of the XVIII Legion. We speak of the Salamanders. In a galaxy suffocating under the weight of endless warfare, compassion is often discarded as a fatal weakness. The Imperium of man survives through ruthless pragmatism, feeding millions into the grinding maw of the war machine daily. The Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's angels of death, are engineered to be the apex instruments of this systemic devastation. They are transhuman monoliths of ceramite and genetically enhanced muscle, purpose-built to conquer and cleanse. Yet, the sons of Vulkan reject the sterile detachment of their transhuman brethren. They harbour a blazing core of unyielding humanity. They view the fragile, mortal citizens of the Imperium not as acceptable collateral damage, but as the very foundation of their sacred duty. They are the shield that stands between the innocent and the creeping horrors of the cosmic void. This profound empathy is the central tenet of the Promethean cult, a philosophy forged in the heart of unimaginable hostility. To understand the XVIII Legion, you must first comprehend the crucible that shaped them. Cast your minds to the eastern fringe, to the death world of Nocturne. It is a realm of eternal geological agony. Tectonic plates grind and shatter incessantly, tearing the planet's crust apart to expose the boiling mantle below. Rivers of superheated magma carve jagged paths across the desolate plains of obsidian. Toxic ash chokes the atmosphere, blotting out the distant stars and casting the world into an endless, suffocating twilight. The harsh environment breeds resilience. The native population survives within heavily fortified sanctuary cities, clinging to existence through sheer, stubborn willpower. Every stone placed, every wall erected, represents a defiant victory against a planet that actively seeks their eradication. It is here, amidst the roaring flames and the deafening concussions of the forge, that the Salamanders temper their spirits. The relentless rhythmic pounding of colossal drop hammers echoes through the subterranean armories, a mechanical heartbeat resonating against anvils of unyielding adamantium. They are master artificers, pouring their reverence for life into the creation of devastating weaponry. A weapon, Vulkan taught, only achieves true greatness when its wielder understands exactly what it is meant to protect. Look upon the physical form of a salamander, and you will witness a terrifying visage that belies their noble intent. The unique radiation of Nocturne's unstable star, interacting with the flawed melanochrome organ of their genetic seed, triggers a radical mutation. Their skin darkens into an impenetrable abyssal pitch resembling scorched coal. Their eyes transform into glowing, lidless orbs of burning crimson, radiating a malevolent heat. To the uninitiated, they appear as the very demons they are sworn to banish, nightmares ripped from the deepest mythologies of old Earth. Their hulking frames are encased in mastercrafted Mark X Gravis armor, painted in a striking, vibrant emerald green, heavily adorned with drake scales and masterfully etched honor markings. They carry weapons of localized apocalypse, the roaring flamer, the armor-melting melter gun, and the devastating thunder hammer. When they march, the ground itself trembles beneath their adamantium-shod boots. They are giants of fire and wrath, clad in the trappings of mythological dragons. Yet, beneath this fearsome exterior, the Promethean creed demands rigid discipline and endless patience. A salamander never acts out of mindless fury. Every burst of Prometheum, every swing of the hammer, is a calculated application of overwhelming force designed to preserve the sanctity of human life. They walk among the mortals they defend, standing shoulder to shoulder with the fragile men and women of the Astra Militarum. They remember the names of the worlds they save. They carry the weight of every lost soul upon their broad, armoured shoulders. This relentless dedication exacts a heavy toll. By refusing to retreat, by choosing to form a living bulwark against the tide of enemies, the 18th Legion frequently suffers catastrophic casualties. Their history is an endless ledger of heroic, agonizing sacrifices. They willingly stand in the fire so that others might escape the flames. Consider the legendary campaigns where the green-clad giants anchored the crumbling lines. When the hive cities fracture under the assault of Xenos horrors, it is the Salamanders who hold the critical choke points. They deploy their devastating short-range firepower to construct impenetrable walls of thermal energy. The roaring streams of ignited Promethean cleanse the corridors, reducing chitin and Xenos bone to harmless, scattering ash. They do not merely destroy, they eradicate the threat utterly, ensuring no trace of the enemy remains to harm the retreating civilians. Their melter blasts vaporize heavy armor plating in blinding flashes of localized solar heat, reducing enemy dreadnoughts and assault vehicles to glowing puddles of molten slag. They bring the Emperor's peace with a terrifying, absolute finality. But the galaxy is a vast, unforgiving theatre, and the shadows are lengthening. Our records indicate a severe atmospheric disturbance gathering near a vital industrial sector on a frontier world. The picked feeds from the outer orbital stations capture fleeting glimpses of jagged, bladed vessels slipping through the warp storms. These are not the brute forces of the Orc, nor the mindless swarms of the Tyrannid. These are the elusive, sadistic hunters of Commorragh. The Drukhari have emerged from the webway, their barbed skiffs silently descending upon an undefended manufactorum. Below, thousands of exhausted Imperial labourers huddle in the darkness, clutching their rusted tools and failing lasguns, unaware of the insidious terror descending from the ash-choked sky. The veil of reality shivers. The predators prepare their cruel descent. The air grows cold, and a terrifying silence falls over the archives. The true test of the Promethean fire is about to commence, and the darkness is hungry. The dimensional membrane of the webway portal ruptured with a sickening, silent snap. From the jagged tier in reality, the spiked prows of Drukhari raider transports pierced the suffocating smog of the Manufactorum district. Their hulls boasted agonizing, razor-sharp geometries designed to catch the meager light and fracture it into blinding shards. Anti-gravitic engines hummed with a predatory, high-pitched whine, descending upon the sprawling industrial complex like carrion birds circling a wounded behemoth. These were the Kabbalite warriors of the Obsidian Rose, cruel silhouettes clad in segmented, bladed armor that shifted fluidly with every predatory movement. They clutched splinter rifles, wicked weapons engineered to fire crystalline shards of synthesized neurotoxin. They sought no honorable engagement, nor did they care for territorial conquest. They desired only raw, terrified mortal cargo to drag back into the lightless, eternal pits of Commorragh. The air chilled rapidly as their sleek transports hovered above the rusted iron mesh catwalks of the central processing hub. Below, the sprawling factory floor plunged into emergency illumination. Sputtering crimson lumens bathed the panicked Imperial labourers in a harsh, unforgiving glare. Thousands of exhausted men and women huddled desperately behind massive conveyor belts and stacked Munitorum supply crates. They clutched poorly maintained, standard-issue lasguns, their unarmoured hands trembling against the cold steel casings. The rhythmic, failing thud of the primary atmospheric scrubbers provided a grim metronome to their mounting despair. They knew the terrible legends of the spiked shadows that descended from the sky. The Kabbalites struck with terrifying, synchronized precision. They dropped gracefully from the hovering raiders, their bladed boots striking the iron catwalks without a single sound. Volleys of crystalline shards rained down into the huddled masses, bypassing rusted ferrocrete cover and striking the frontline workers. The victims dropped silently, their nervous systems rapidly overloaded by the alien toxins, leaving only paralyzed, helpless husks. The Xenos raiders moved closer, unfurling their energized capture nets and agonizing man-catchers. The laborers braced for the final, inevitable shadow to fall across their eyes. Suddenly, the primary blast doors of Sector 4 detonated inward with a deafening concussive roar. A massive shockwave of displaced air hurled the advancing Kabbalite vanguard backward, shattering their elegant, mocking formation. Through the settling dust and the twisting black smoke, immense figures breached the perimeter. The Adeptus Astartes had answered the desperate distress vox. The heavy, rhythmic thud of adamantium-shod boots slamming against the ferrocrete flooring shook the very foundations of the besieged manufactorum. Forgefather Histan led the vanguard. A towering monolith of master-crafted emerald ceramite, the heavy servo motors of his Mark X Gravis armor whined in deep, mechanical protest as he raised his relic weapon. Behind him, the tactical marines of the 18th Legion locked their massive bolters into rigorous firing positions. Here the beautiful, lethal symphony of relentless Imperial engineering. The massive, box-fed magazines slammed into the heavy bolter housings with a heavy, metallic clatter. The charging handles racked backward with brutal force. They slid the explosive, mass-reactive bolt shells directly into the firing chambers. Auto-senses housed within the intimidating, snarling faceplates of their Mark VII helmets synchronized instantly. Targeting reticles locked onto the elusive, darting heat signatures of the Xenos raiders dancing above. The heavy weapons specialists stepped forward, their massive forms anchoring the line. They carried the heavy flamers, the holy, blessed instruments of the Promethean cult. Pressurized Promethean tanks, secured heavily to their armored power packs, hissed softly. The volatile chemical mixtures primed. The pilot lights sparked to life, igniting with a sharp, distinct snap. The blue-hot flames danced hungrily at the heavy iron barrels. The Salamanders did not charge blindly into the enemy ranks, seeking personal glory. They instantly recognized the fragile mortal cargo trembling in the shadows behind them. The Space Marines fanned out, forming an impenetrable interlocking wall of emerald ceramite and broad, reinforced shoulder pauldrons. They placed their immense, armoured bodies forward. They positioned themselves directly between the advancing Drukhari hunters and the terrified Imperial workers. They became a living fortress, a resolute bulwark of defiance. The Kabbalite warriors, enraged by the sudden intervention and the denial of their prize, unleashed a blistering torrent of splinter fire. Thousands of toxic shards struck the Space Marines in a deafening hail. The crystalline projectiles shattered harmlessly against the thick, master-crafted ceramite plating. The volley left only tiny scratches on the intricate Drake-scale heraldry. One massive warrior, Brother Sergeant Nocturne, stepped into the path of a heavy dark lance beam. The weapon aimed squarely at a cluster of wounded mechanics. The searing antimatter beam struck his broad chestplate, scorch marks blooming across the green ceramite. Yet he remained an immovable object. The transhuman warriors absorbed the punishing volley without yielding a single inch of ground. Histan lowered his colossal thunderhammer, the energy field crackling with localized, blinding lightning. He gave the solitary, booming command through his helmet vox. The Salamanders answered with overwhelming force. The heavy bolters roared to life, a deafening cacophony of explosive retribution echoing off the cavernous ceiling. Mass-reactive shells tore through the industrial gloom, striking the hovering raider transports with ruthless, pinpoint accuracy. The explosive detonations ruptured the sleek, anti-gravitic engines. The force sent the fragile alien vessels crashing violently into the iron catwalks above. Then the heavy flamers unleashed their righteous fury. Roaring torrents of ignited promethium surged across the factory floor, forming a blinding wave of white-hot thermal energy. The liquid fire washed over the nimble Cabalite warriors. The inferno instantly melted their ornate, segmented armor. The intense heat reduced their frail, arrogant forms to drifting columns of pale, formless ash. The silent threat of the Xenos was completely eradicated by the deafening roar of the holy inferno. Puddles of molten metal dripped from the overhead structures. The blazing residue illuminated the cavernous space in an angry, flickering orange glow. The temperature within the manufactorum spiked violently, turning the air into a suffocating furnace. The Salamanders stood resolute amidst the blinding heat and the settling ash, their heavy bolters smoking. Their crimson eyes scanned the deep, shifting shadows for any remaining threats. They gently nudged the paralyzed workers behind their massive boots, shielding them from the radiant heat of the melting slag. The first wave of the Xenos hunters had been thoroughly purged from the sector. Yet the deep, mechanical groans of the factory structure warned of a greater disturbance. The true nightmare of the Dark City's raid was still unfolding in the depths below. The groans of the manufactorum infrastructure deepened into a mechanical death rattle, echoing through the labyrinthine corridors. From the subterranean loading bays, the true orchestrators of the raid ascended into the flickering light. An Archon of the Obsidian Rose, clad in armor crafted from crystallized agony and rare alien alloys, stepped gracefully from a heavily armored Ravager gunship. He was flanked by towering grotesques, hulking abominations of stitched muscle, exposed metallic spines, and crude cybernetic augmentation. They lunged forward with frightening, unnatural speed, entirely ignoring the burning remnants of their vanguard. The Archon raised an agonizing blast pistol, aiming with cold calculation. He unleashed a blinding beam of dark matter directly at the central structural pillar supporting the upper catwalks. The objective was ruthlessly clear. They sought to collapse the immense ferrocrete structure, crushing the Adeptus Astartes and burying the fragile mortal laborers in a single, devastating stroke of structural failure. Forgefather Heastan anticipated the cruel geometry of the strike before the weapon even fully discharged. He slammed his heavy boot into the deck, anchoring his colossal frame against the iron grating. He swung his massive thunder hammer in a brutal upward arc. The energized, glowing head of the relic weapon collided directly with the incoming beam of localized dark matter. The sheer kinetic force of the impact created a deafening shockwave, sending a brilliant sphere of displaced electrical energy rippling outward in all directions. The concussive blast shattered the surrounding lumen globes, plunging the immediate sector into momentary darkness, save for the roaring blue pilot lights of the heavy flamers. Heastan did not flinch beneath the pressure. He channeled the unyielding spirit of Nocturne, bracing his massive, heavily armored pauldrons against the resulting storm of falling debris. Behind him, the exhausted laborers cowered, entirely shielded from the catastrophic fragmentation by the living wall of transhuman iron and unwavering resolve. "Cleanse them from this holy forge!" Heastan's voice boomed through his external voxcasters, a heavy sound like grinding tectonic plates tearing a world apart. The 18th Legion responded to their commander with terrifying, absolute synchronization. Brother Sergeant Nikeln stepped forward into the vanguard, his heavy melter gun humming with lethal, contained starfire. He leveled the massive, heat-shielded barrel at the charging tide of grotesques. He depressed the heavy-firing stud. A blinding, searing beam of concentrated microwave energy erupted across the cavernous factory floor. The heavy blast struck the leading abomination squarely in the center of its mass. There was absolutely no resistance. The intense, focused heat instantly vaporized the creature's thick armor plating and heavy cybernetic enhancements. The hulking beast dissolved into a thick cloud of superheated steam and bubbling, dark liquid slag. It collapsed heavily onto the iron deck, completely silenced and utterly eradicated by the overwhelming thermal discharge of the Promethean weapon. The Archon shrieked in absolute fury, a discordant, high-pitched sound that scraped painfully against the advanced autosenses of the Space Marines. He rapidly signaled his elite incubi guard to advance and break the Imperial line. They were silent, lethal executioners wielding massive, two-handed, energized claves. They moved like shifting, unpredictable shadows, blurring past the slow, lumbering machinery of the Manufactorum. They intentionally targeted the vulnerable flanks of the transhuman formation, specifically aiming to bypass the armored giants. They sought to strike the defenseless mortals trapped behind them. The Salamanders immediately recognized the cowardly tactical shift. They broke their rigid, impenetrable gun line, deliberately widening their defensive perimeter. They spread out to physically intercept the lethal, darting Xenos shadows. This entirely selfless maneuver intentionally exposed their own mobility joints and vulnerable armor seals to the devastating barrage of splinter fire raining from the catwalks above. A blinding flurry of crystalline shards struck a tactical marine designated as Brother Val. The sheer, overwhelming volume of the toxic fusillade overloaded his localized iron halo energy shielding. Spiked projectiles violently found the minute gaps between his heavy ceramite plates. Blinding electrical arcs violently sparked from the ruptured power cables around his waist and heavily armored neck joints. Dark, thick synthetic fluids leaked from the catastrophically damaged servo motors, hissing aggressively as they struck the heated iron floor beneath his heavy boots. Yet Brother Val completely refused to fall. He planted his adamantium sabatons firmly onto the grating, ignoring the blaring system failure warnings flashing across his retinal display. He raised his heavy bolter with one trembling, severely damaged arm. He fired a continuous, punishing barrage of mass-reactive shells into the advancing incubi, denying them the vital seconds they desperately needed to reach the huddled laborers. He became an immovable anchor of pure, defiant willpower. He stand-charged the Archon, crossing the distance with terrifying momentum. The Forgefather's heavy steps cracked the solid ferrocrete flooring with every single stride. The Xenos leader unleashed a flurry of rapid, blinding strikes with his crackling blade. The alien weapon struck He-Stand's master-crafted breastplate repeatedly, leaving deep, glowing gouges in the sacred emerald ceramite. Showers of golden sparks rained over the Forgefather's stoic faceplate. He simply absorbed the brutal punishment, a silent, emerald monolith, weathering a desperate storm. With a terrifying roar of Promethean wrath, He-Stand brought the thunderhammer crashing down. The Archon narrowly dodged the crushing, direct blow, but the resulting localized shockwave hurled the frail Xenos backward against a massive industrial lathe. The Archon's crystalline armor shattered violently upon impact, reducing his cruel, arrogant visage to a ruined, heavily sparking husk. The Xenos command structure was broken, his raid completely shattered by the immovable force of the Salamanders. The surviving Kabbalite warriors, witnessing the total, catastrophic collapse of their leadership, immediately broke their coordinated assault. They scrambled frantically back toward the shimmering webway portal, abandoning their paralyzed and ruined brethren without a second thought. The Space Marines did not pursue the fleeing cowards. They maintained their rigid defensive perimeter, their heavy weapons tracking the retreating shadows, until the dimensional tier finally sealed with a sickening, definitive pop. The deafening roar of battle slowly faded, replaced by the mechanical hissing of venting power armor, and the quiet, terrified sobs of the saved Imperial laborers. The air was thick with the harsh scent of ozone, vaporized metal, and the unmistakable, purified stench of Xenos ash. The immediate threat was successfully purged from the Manufactorum. However, the cost of their noble defense was becoming devastatingly apparent as the dust began to settle. The archivist pauses. My faithful acolytes. I carefully trace the heavily charred edges of the forbidden scroll, feeling the lingering, ghostly heat of that ancient conflict beneath my fingertips. The Space Marines stood victorious upon the ruined floor, yes, but their ancient armor was battered, their power reserves critically depleted by the immense thermal output. The sheer volume of fire they had willingly absorbed to protect the innocent civilians had severely compromised their heavy warplate. Brother Val knelt heavily upon the scorched deck, his heavy weapon finally lowering to the floor. His failing servo motors whined a high-pitched, mournful dirge of total mechanical failure. The Promethean cult demands ultimate sacrifice, and the 18th Legion pays this heavy toll with grim, unyielding acceptance. The factory was saved, but the dense shadows within the deeper sublevels remained ominously, unnaturally quiet. A profound, piercing chill began to seep through the superheated air, rapidly freezing the pools of molten metal. The true anomaly, the dark mystery that necessitated this archival record, was only just beginning to awaken beneath the earth. The Manufactorum floor resembled a shattered cathedral of brutalist industry. The deafening, rhythmic roar of the heavy bolters finally ceased, yielding to the sharp, metallic ticking of rapidly cooling ceramite and settling ferrocrete. Deep puddles of localized liquid slag, birthed from the devastating thermal discharges of the heavy melter weapons, cast a sickly, dying orange radiance against the suffocating shadows. Forgefather Histan stood entirely immobile, a towering emerald monument anchored amidst the absolute devastation. His advanced autosenses systematically catalogued the severe structural fractures spiderwebbing across the vaulted ceiling. He lowered his massive thunder hammer, the crackling energy field powering down with a heavy, resonant electrical hum. Around his towering form, the tactical squads maintained their rigid, interlocking defensive postures. Brother Val remained heavily anchored to the scorched iron grating. An apothecary advanced from the rear guard, his heavy narthesium gauntlet whining loudly as it interfaced with the damaged MK-X Gravis warplate. Bright sparks cascaded from the ruptured joints as the medical specialist applied emergency localized repairs. The exhausted mortal laborers watched this transhuman operation with profound, silent awe. However, the ambient environment of the Manufactorum began to shift with terrifying, unnatural rapidity. The suffocating, blistering heat generated by the heavy flamers dissipated almost instantly. It was violently replaced by an aggressive, piercing cold that completely defied the mechanical logic of the active, subterranean industrial complex. Thick, heavy frost crystallized rapidly along the jagged edges of the ruined iron catwalks. Histan signaled a silent, sharp command through the encrypted tactical Vox network. He selected a heavily armed vanguard detachment, advancing toward the primary descent elevators, his massive adamantium boots crushing the heavy frost. They plunged rapidly into the lightless, forgotten depths of the industrial complex. The structural architecture shifted dramatically. The crude, functional steel beams transitioned seamlessly into massive, smooth pillars of dark, unknown hyperalloys. They finally breached the primary containment threshold. It was a colossal, circular bulkhead forged from dull, unpolished adamantium. The massive, interlocking hinges were warped and shattered by a profound, localized application of extreme gravitational force. In the dead center of the freezing, cavernous expanse sat the source of the anomaly. It was a monolithic, geometric machine, humming with a suppressed, terrifying localized power. Intricate, crystalline matrices pulsed rhythmically with a sickly, pale blue light, radiating the aggressive cold. It was an ancient stasis engine, a massive piece of forgotten archaeotech designed specifically to imprison something of unimaginable consequence. The central stasis field was rapidly collapsing. The absolute zero containment protocols were failing sequentially, shifting the ancient machine into a critical, highly unstable state. To move the colossal machine would guarantee a catastrophic localized breach. They brought forth their heavy melter weaponry once again, not to destroy, but to forge. They targeted the surrounding adamantium pillars, discharging concentrated thermal blasts at the heavy structural bases. The transhuman warriors used their heavy thunderhammers, manipulating the rapid flow of the liquid metal, expertly redirecting the agonizing heat toward the failing stasis chamber. They systematically constructed a crude, localized thermal barrier. He stood at the absolute center, his master-crafted mantle radiating an intense, defiant heat. He plunged the energized head of his relic thunderhammer directly into the primary control console of the failing stasis engine. He became the central grounding rod, absorbing the agonizing chronal shocks to preserve the fragile equilibrium of the containment field. The Forgefather recognized the intricate, forgotten runes etched deep within the engine's core. They bore a striking, undeniable resemblance to the ancient markings found upon the scattered relics of their lost Primarch. The Salamanders would hold this frozen, buried line. Their duty is eternal. Hours bled into days within that lightless abyss. The heavy, rhythmic thud of Mechanicus breach drills finally shattered the oppressive silence. Tech priests draped in heavy crimson robes descended upon the ruined platform. The Vanguard detachment finally deactivated their exhausted flamer units. They turned silently away from the frosted anomaly, their emerald armor heavily scarred. They marched back toward the surface without demanding a single accolade. I carefully release my trembling grip upon the heavy, metallic edges of the forbidden vellum. The ancient, rusted servo skulls retreat slowly into the suffocating shadows of the Sanctum of Oaths. I carefully roll the crackling parchment, sealing the tragic, glorious record of the XVIII Legion beneath the heavy wax stamp of the Inquisition. The truth of the Adeptus Astartes is rarely a tale of flawless victories. The sons of Vulkan understand this cosmic burden better than any other transhuman lineage. They willingly endure the absolute horrors of the galaxy so that the ordinary mortal citizens never have to experience the suffocating void. The Promethean cult teaches that a flame can eradicate the foulest corruption, but that same flame provides the essential, localized warmth necessary to sustain fragile life through the longest, darkest night. True strength is demonstrated by the unwavering willingness to bear the heaviest shields and to preserve the sanctity of the innocent against impossible odds. The fire endures. Imperator Gloria in excelsis terra. If you wish to uncover more hidden truths today, please like, share, and subscribe to help illuminate this dark universe.